sent their way, but it's suddenly broken in two by Guts. He's here, and once again he is ready to kick ass. He goes straight for Mozgus, who leaps out of the way of his attack. The shit is on. While all this is happening, we see, yeah, Luca's okay. She's talking with Skull Knight, really believing she died and is in the afterlife. The Revenant wonders why she decided to try and kill herself, but Luca admits she thought she would have survived the fall, maybe landing on a tree, or sliding along the wall and catching a jutted out section. In fact, now that she's really thinking about it, that was a really fucking stupid idea. And now she's in the afterlife, not lucky enough to go to heaven, so she must have been in purgatory or even hell, stuck for all eternity with a skeletal horseman, surrounded by dead bodies. Nah, she's alive. It's the mass grave right outside the tower. But if she wants to stay alive, stay put. The apostle from before is still there, and it's watching them. Coming back to Guts, we see the fight with Mozgus is still in full force. Him and his torturers revealing grand angel wings. Mozgus using his to fly back, and Guts trying to take him down with his throwing knives. But his men are not going to let their leader go down easy. All the while, Jerome has to keep Isidro from rushing into the fight, who stupidly believes he can get some glory by helping the Black Swordsman. But the kid ain't exactly on the same level. These pseudo-apostle dudes are no joke. The one with the chain takes the lead, striking first at Guts, but he's tragically separated from his right arm after Guts meets him in the air. The tiny torturer with the foregrips tries to get behind him, but he has to vanish once Guts takes a swing with his iron arm. Then a kick. Then the guy is right up in his face and going for his eye, so Guts bites down on the grips and headbutts the little guy. These dudes are strong fighters, but they're used to scared peasants who don't know how to fight back. Now they're dealing with a fucking lunatic who only knows how to kill people, so he is just as relentless. Even the big torturer coming in with the breaking wheel isn't enough to end things. They send each other flying, breaking through the stone walls. The group simply watches and commentates on the whole fight, Jerome wanting to bail out and Isidro shaming him into staying. The torturers lose their masks, finally showing their faces for the first time since they've been revealed. The big one has a baby face. That's about the only noteworthy thing. The others look as ugly as you expected. Leaving that on the back burner, we see Skull Knight and Luca still dealing with the Apostle. She has no idea what's happening. All of reality is just sort of coming apart at the seams. It's been a tough week. The Apostle says that this place is his garden, and the living are not allowed, striking at them with his tentacles. But Skull Knight cuts them off. The Apostle now freaking out since he's realizing a little too late that the dude on the horse is not one to be fucked with. He tries to bail, Skull Knight managing to cut him as he leaps away, and the Apostle snatches Luca as he makes his escape. Skull Knight swears the wound is bad enough that the demon can't get too far away, but something about his form is bad news. Luca wakes up in a makeshift shrine, an effigy of a hawk made up of human skin and bones, surrounded by candles. This is the hideout of the Apostle. He tells Luca his story. The Apostle was nobody. He had no name, no family, nothing. His only memories are of being at the base of the tower, collecting trash to stay alive. One day he stumbled onto a bailet, but he had no idea what it was. In fact, it was only after he found the bailet that he felt compelled whatsoever to try and seek out other humans. Well, he was obviously chased out of society for being a creepy wild man, so he decided to dig a small hole in the ground for shelter, only leaving to gather food at night. He instinctively dug deeper as time went on, almost wanting to just get as far away from the rest of humanity as he can get. But one day, a corpse fell into his hole, followed by others. Out of nowhere, a bunch of villagers settled right at his spot and turned his shelter into a pit to dump dead bodies into it. He was crushed by the corpses, doomed to die alone without anyone even knowing he existed. But as he slipped into unconsciousness, the bailet activated. He met the God Hand, who gave him knowledge and showed him the world. He could finally put words to emotions, concepts, thoughts, and thanks to this, he finally became aware of how pitiful his existence really was. So the stranger agreed to sacrifice the one thing he had to grant his wish, the world around him. Also, he can become an egg that will hatch and create the perfect world. Yeah, the dude became a living bailet. I warned you, things were gonna get weird. The only reason a mock eclipse is about to happen is because this guy is giving up the one thing he's ever had, the world as he knew it. He's sacrificing the very earth that St. Albion stands on, and everyone inside of it. And the reason he's doing this? He despises other humans and their society. He saw them as cowards that have to choose between a broken totalitarian system or death. So, in their fear, they became the very thing they were taught to hate, to justify everything to themselves. People became heretics because it justified what the Holy See were doing to them. They needed an actual enemy to be afraid of. If not, then it would be all for nothing. And the Apostle hated this. His first real emotions was hatred of everyone around him. They ruined his garden. Luca thinks this is some kind of revenge plot, but he admits he's been watching her and the other girls for a while, specifically Nina. For some reason, she fascinated him. On one hand, she's a terrified girl clinging to Luca like a scared daughter, and on the other, she's... you know. So Nina embodied the very contradiction that the egg apostle hates. She's a coward, yet she hates the one thing she clings to in order to not feel scared. And everyone in the camp is guilty of the same crime. Every man, woman, and child. So to create the perfect world, these people need to be dealt with. Coming back to the fight between Guts and the torturers, we see that it's just as violent as ever. The main battle is between Guts and the guy with the breaking wheel, though the others occasionally jump in to help. It's a rough time. Guts is completely on the defensive. He throws one of his knives into the tiny one's eye and tears off the big one's foot with the Dragon Slayer. The momentum is finally turning in his favor and everyone knows it, though Nina is still pissing herself in the corner. She's useless. Farnese is also losing her shit, but it's a bit more quiet. Out of nowhere, her boss and his friends sprouted angel wings and started attacking everyone. Every single time Guts shows up in her life, things stop making sense. The sight of Nina crying out for Luca actually makes her think about her own childhood. The reason she's so terrified of Guts is because of what he represents. That cozy blanket of religion she used to hide from the scary parts of the world, every time he shows up, it goes up in smoke. Her faith really was hollow, like Guts said, and it's only when she's truly powerless and out of her element does she realize this. By the way, while all of this character introspection is happening, Isidro hits Jerome in the nuts. The birdsuit torturer tells Moskis to simply leave, let them take care of the Black Swordsman. Moskis and the twin torturers decide, yeah, that's probably a good idea, so they can go back to their duty of lighting a mentally handicapped woman on fire. Isidro latches onto him, trying to knock the guy out with a rock, but it doesn't work, so now he's just kind of forced to hang on as Moskis flies away. Guts is still trying to get to the leader above anything else, and thanks God for letting him meet Father Moskis, collapsing to and turned his shelter into a pit to dump dead bodies in, and turned his shelter and thanks God for letting him meet Father Moskis, collapsing to his knees in prayer as he bleeds to death. Well, Guts takes off the device and pulls out the feathers. The other spectators barely able to understand how this dude managed to kill these guys. They were infamous for a reason. But no time for a break. The tower starts collapsing around them. Luca and Skull Knight watch the corpses in the mass grave become a massive blob, just like what happened in the tower. This time, it's a humongous beast, feeding off the malice that's flooding the place, only made worse as the worlds of the living and the dead start to fuse. The two ride to safety as the monster tries to attack, Skull Knight convinced that the mock eclipse is starting. All the while, Azan talks with the other knights about the scene at the tower, having just recaptured the prisoners Isidro let loose. For some reason, everyone they've talked to is freaking out about monsters inside, but that's silly. And to make matters worse, nobody knows what happened to Farnese. Then the fucking tower explodes. They all watch in horror as a shapeless form pours out, the blob now moving on to devour everyone it can in the camp, the tower collapsing from the inside as it rips through the monastery. Our poor heroes are forced to run for it as everything falls apart. Farnese trips on the stairs and almost falls to her death when she's suddenly saved by Serpico. He's still alive, but probably not for long. A lot of heavy stones are falling on top of everybody. Moskis and Isidro, still flying in the air, watch the tower fall apart, the ruins breaking down into the shape of a hand. Seem familiar? We see the other girls are still outside the camp watching the tower collapse. One of the prostitutes tries to run down, worried about what happened to her friends, but she's thankfully swayed away from the idea, especially when they start to hear screaming from the slums. It's complete hell on earth. Dark spirits are possessing people and wreaking havoc. All the scared villagers are ripped to pieces by the horde of monsters. The survivors run for the tower for shelter, unaware of the blob monster rampaging there, and our protagonist wakes up just as the camp descends into an utter nightmare. Guts watching in horror as fires burn in the shape of a brand. Just like before, he's standing on the palm of a hand as demons slaughter everyone below, and he knows this. Azan and his men are trying to evacuate the tower just as the villagers run towards them for shelter, the possessed following right behind. And to make things even worse, the blob is coming for them from the side. It seems like all is lost, but a wave of fire burns away everything. Mazgis makes his debut, throwing Isidro off as he makes a big, inspiring speech. He believes God bestowed him with his powers to save everyone from the monsters, and orders the villagers to make a stake. If they can burn Casca, they might be able to get everything to disappear, still thinking she's the one doing all this. Mazgis and his remaining torturers protect the villagers as they prepare the pillar. Azan and his knights jumping into the fight to protect whoever they can as well. Isidro survived being yeeted by Mazgis, him and Puck reuniting as they watch the mob drag Casca over to the stake. Guts also sees this, but he's distracted by the blob manifesting behind him, consuming the corpses of Mazgis' soldiers, while it shapes itself into the forms of the God Hand. Guts tries to attack, almost by reflex, but they aren't the real thing, simply reshaping itself whenever he strikes. He remembers Skull Knight's words, "This isn't the real eclipse. It's basically a shadow, an imitation." In fact, the pain from his brand isn't as excruciating as it is when he's next to the real deal. The blob closes in around Guts as the villagers finish their stake, and he's faced with his choice. Waste his time fighting this thing off, or rush down to save his woman. Guts tries to push through, but it's simply too much. Casca is tied to the pillar, and they light their torches. All he can think about is how this is exactly how it happened last time. He was so busy fighting he couldn't save Casca, and now the same ending is about to take place. He won't be able to keep her safe. Luca and Skull Knight escape from the camp, and he even tells her to stay as far away as she can, but she can't help herself. She's going back to save her friends. Skull Knight respects her grit, willing to throw herself back into literal hell to save her loved ones, and admits that even if she asked him, he wouldn't be able to help. It's not how this works. This is a parallel to the eclipse, meaning someone came back for him to fight. Zod. The Egg Apostle is crawling up the tower, bleeding from the wound Skull Knight gave him. He's reflecting on his life, how things could have been different if he met Mazgis like the others. But in the end, it never happened. All he can do now is wait for death. As he climbs, he spots the demon infant curled into a hole of its own, dying, having spent too much of its power to keep Casca safe. Taking pity on the corrupted child, the Egg Apostle takes it into his body, saying that it'll be able to die peacefully with the demon. And this... I can't even begin to describe how important this ends up being. Just know that it goes some fucking places. Like, the most recent chapters basically made this scene probably one of the biggest ones in the entire fucking story. Anyway, Casca is at the mercy of the mob, Isidro and Puck watching from the wall above. The others are there on the wall with him. Jerome pretending to still be a heretic hunter and planning on running off with Nina the first chance they get, because he doesn't want Farnese and Serpico to be mad at him. Though, Isidro spoils the plan with his big mouth. Casca hallucinates the crowd as a horde of demons, remembering her time during the eclipse. It's all admits that even if she asked him, he wouldn't be able to help. It's not how this works. This is a parallel to the eclipse, meaning someone came back for him to fight. Zod. The Egg Apostle is crawling up the tower, bleeding from the wound Skull Knight gave him. He's reflecting on his life, how things could have been different if he met Mazgis like the others. But in the end, it never happened. All he can do now is wait for death. As he climbs, he spots the demon infant curled into a hole of its own, dying, having spent too much of its power to keep Casca safe. Taking pity on the corrupted child, the Egg Apostle takes it into his body, saying that it'll be able to die peacefully with the demon. And this... I can't even begin to describe how important this ends up being. Just know that it goes some fucking places. Like, the most recent chapters basically made this scene probably one of the biggest ones in the entire fucking story. Anyway, Casca is at the mercy of the mob, Isidro and Puck watching from the wall above. The others are there on the wall with him. Jerome pretending to still be a heretic hunter and planning on running off with Nina the first chance they get, because he doesn't want Farnese and Serpico to be mad at him. Though, Isidro spoils the plan with his big mouth. Casca hallucinates the crowd as a horde of demons, remembering her time during the eclipse. It's all symmetrical, like poetry. It rhymes. Just as Mazgis gives the order to set her on fire, Guts is stuck fighting the blob, watching the torches fly towards Casca. No matter what he does, he can't get out of the way. The stake is lit, burning at Casca's feet. But just because things are similar doesn't mean they're going to be the same. Details are shifted around, and if enough details are changed, then maybe you can affect the outcome. Guts managed to do this, even if unintentionally. He's not completely alone this time. Isidro and the others prepare a risky bungee jump. The kid leaps down, grabs Casca, and pulls her out of the stake before he can burn her alive. They did it. They saved her. This pisses off Mazgis something fierce, and he dives down to recapture the witch. They just barely manage to avoid his attack, and we see Guts explode out of the blob. He's managed to fight his way out, and he isn't stopping. Just as Skull Knight guessed, Guts is more than just a shadow on the water. He's something more. Running down the tower right for Mosgus, he impales him right in the chest. The two slam straight into the stone wall, the impact hard enough to explode dust and bricks all over the crowd. The terrified peasants watch their guardian angel be defeated by a demon in all black, Guts standing triumphant over the priest. For a brief moment, Guts could have sworn he saw the demon infant, but he's unaware of what's going on with the egg apostle and all that mess. Who gives a shit? Guts managed to save his mocha chocolate waifu. All is good in the world. Oh fuck, I forgot about those two. Yeah, the twins are still alive, and they're intent on making sure Casca dies, though Isidro won't let them take her. Also, Mosgus is still alive. He's alive and fully transformed into an apostle. His angel wings now stony arms that just beat the living fuck out of Guts. Guts is distracted worrying about Casca, but Jerome goes out of his way to protect her from the twins, letting Guts take his mind off that and focus on the fight. He finally has people he can trust to take care of things. He's not shouldering everything by himself, and he absolutely needs that because Mosgus is royally pissed off. Turns out the Bible he always carried with him protected him from the attack, giving him enough time to transform, covering himself in new armor, these solid scales. Now the guy is nearly indestructible. He orders the twins to capture Casca. The others get to be torn apart by the saw. And once he realizes that Guts being there means that he had to have killed the rest of his men, Mosgus starts crying blood, swearing to kill Guts in order to honor their memory. They fight, but Mosgus is on a whole other level now. Each hit is like being smacked with a heavy stone, and the Dragon Slayer barely affects him now. Guts is distracted momentarily by the twins swooping down to get Casca, and Mosgus uses this window to beat him senseless. Well, we take a break from the fight to see Azan is in the middle of complete insanity. He's trying to protect the refugees, but they can barely keep up between them, the blob, and the possessed, especially since Mosgus isn't burning away the monsters to give them a bit of support. If things don't get better fast, they're all gonna die. Guts is still getting his ass beat. It's kinda sad. Mosgus is relentless with the attacks, even using his fire breath to burn him to a crisp. It seems like the guy can't be stopped, only for the flames to be redirected into the air, hitting the twins. Guts used the Dragon Slayer as a wall to keep the fire away from him, and he shoves the blade into Mosgus' mouth and tries to take the top of his head off with a heavy push, but it's not working. The guy is a tough bastard, biting down on the sword and keeping Guts stuck in place. He tries to break the blade now that he's vulnerable, but a well-placed throwing knife in the eye throws Mosgus into a rage. The others debate on what to do next, whether they run away or stay and try to finish off the last two torturers to help Guts. Nina is freaking out, convinced that if she stays, then she's a dead woman. She tries to run only to see Farnese and Serpico walking towards them. Nina freezes, still thinking they'll kill her for heresy, and the twins ready their saw around her neck. Right before they can decapitate her, however, she slips over the edge of the wall and crashes through a conveniently placed shed. The others aren't sure if she's alive or dead, but they don't really have time to care. The torturers are still hanging around in the air. Puck offers to handle the situation, much to Isidro and Jerome's skepticism, but he's actually pretty useful, since he can blind people, remember? Fuck you guys, you're just haters. Puck is cool. Still, now the twins are vulnerable, giving Isidro a shot to nail them with his throwing stones. They fall to the ground and get executed by Jerome. Mosgus is distracted by their deaths, upset to see the last of his friends dead, and genuinely confused as to why people are trying to interfere with his work. But Guts isn't stopping. He swears he will never let Mosgus touch Casca again. The surviving peasants beg Mosgus to defeat Guts as the blob gets closer, still convinced he's the one man who can stop the horrors from devouring them all. The fight between Guts and Mosgus remains a pretty tight stalemate, the Dragon Slayer unable to break through the armor, Guts getting the wind knocked out of him, and Mosgus using this chance to bring his attention to all the terrified people, begging them to sacrifice Casca, should thousands die to save one woman. The rest of the cast ponder the question, Isidro doubting his claims, but Puck actually wonders if maybe Mosgus has a point. Maybe if the people with the brands leave the area, things will go back to normal. We know this is bullshit, since it's actually the Egg Apostle that caused everything to go to hell, and it's part of a larger scheme by the God Hand. But these guys weren't there for that story. Still, Guts doesn't seem to give a shit anyway. The way he sees it, the villagers were idiots for putting their faith in a single woman anyway. They could have run away or tried to escape, but instead they chose to bow down and wait for someone to save them. So fuck them. Mosgus is pissed off at Guts for insulting their faith, and unintentionally exposes his weak spot. The spot where the Dragon Slayer hit the Bible dug into Mosgus, creating a vulnerability in his armor. Guts is beaten senseless. so badly that he's seemingly knocked out cold, only limply putting one hand against Mosgus as he falls to the ground. Even then, he's not given any relief, the demon priest slamming him into the floor again and again. Mosgus tries to give a speech about how Guts will never win because he doesn't believe in Jesus. That's basically what it amounts to. But it turns out he's a bit more clever than the evil preacher gave him credit for. He put a handful of bombs right in the weak spot, right where the Bible saved him before. They explode and open a huge hole in Mosgus's chest, and Guts goes straight in, slashing at the new wound and tearing him open. Guts has one final message for his opponent before he dies. If you see God, tell him to leave me the hell alone. If you're a Reddit atheist, that's probably the tightest shit ever. The fight ends with Guts driving his sword into Mosgus's neck, going straight through and bursting out the back, his scales flying off from the force. It's finally over. Mosgus and his men are all dead. His final words a prayer as fire bellows out from his wounds. He tries to pull Guts down with him, but the guy isn't having it, flinging Mosgus off his sword and straight to the ground. Everyone watching as the attempted savior lands in the middle of the crowd. They have no one to save them now, and the blob is getting closer. It's a scene of complete carnage, people consumed in a tidal wave of death, all the hate and despair of the dead now coming to get its revenge on the living. The refugees beg the party to kill Casca as the blob devours them. Whoever's left by the wall is now absorbed and melted down by the monster. Casca convulses as something upsets her, and Puck sees a vision of the eclipse, but she slaps him away before he can get a good idea of what's going on in her head. The only thing that seems to stop her shaking is Guts pulling her into a hug. They're finally reunited. The ceremony is nearly complete. All of the villagers are being absorbed into the blob. The egg apostle thinks about what is to come, happy with his revenge and glad that he can die with purpose. He talks to the demon infant inside of him, now looking a lot more human than before. Meanwhile, Azan tries to lead what's left of the survivors, but the situation is just a complete hellstorm. The refugees retreat into the tower, even though there's also some of the blob monster inside. The Holy Iron Chain Knights are trying to cover their escape. The gate to the tower is lowered, and those outside are left for dead. Azan feeling betrayed as he and his men are essentially abandoned by the people they tried to save. We see Nina is still alive, though she broke her ankle in the fall. She knows the monsters are coming, and it would be a really good idea to start running away, but her injury limits her movements. She tries to use a broom as a walking stick, but falls to the ground, just in time to see the panicked mob of villagers running straight for her. The only thing that saves Nina from being trampled is Luca jumping to her rescue, getting her out of the way of the river of people just in the nick of time. The two are happily reunited, but the blob isn't giving them any time to celebrate. Luca knows that Nina can't run with her injury, so the plan is to hide her in a barrel. It can only fit one person, however, so they have to separate. Besides, someone needs to seal it shut. Nina is terrified of being left alone, but Luca is the only one who can put the cover on for her, so she tries to reassure the coward that all she has to do is stay put and act scared, and she might actually end up making it out alive. After closing the barrel tight, Luca is left to find a solution on her own, the monster inching closer. The rest of the party remains safe on top of the wall, but they're expecting that to change as the beast gets closer. For some reason, some of the villagers actually survive the blob monster by sticking close to Mosgus's corpse, which is still on fire and burning. So they come to the conclusion that maybe it avoids fire. Guts wastes no time tossing a pile of lumber to the ground. Jerome wants to see if they can escape into the tower, seeing as they're completely exposed where they're at, but Guts swears that's a bad idea. With all the villagers running into one spot, that's where the monster's gonna end up going. Their only chance is to stick to one spot and fight until sunrise, where the blob will get burned away. Farnese can barely handle how calm Guts is acting, going from terrified of the guy to damn near worshipping him in a matter of seconds. While she's scared of everything, this guy just treats these horrible things as routine. In a weird way, it's comforting for her, almost like she's leeching off his bravery. Guts also has a discovery of his own. Ever since he became the Black Swordsman, Guts has been worried that everything he's been through has been for nothing, that it's been pointless and there's no hope left. But now he knows there's something to stay alive for. Guts has a reason to keep going, a slight She remembers that she's still sickly and could die at any moment, but all this does is make Nina latch on to life even harder. As much as she claims to hate Luca, she was right. The more scared she is, the harder she'll try to stay alive. So she'll sit tight in the barrel just like her mentor told her to. It's definitely the smart choice considering everyone else is dying horrifically. So yeah, just try to fall asleep or something. Also, Guts was right when he guessed the inside of the tower was a bad idea, and matters only get worse as the blob tears down what's left of the stone in the tower, replacing it all with the hand-shaped mountain we saw during the eclipse. Guts, Casca, even Puck are overwhelmed by the presence of so much undead. The collective consciousness of the living and the dead are demanding one thing, the desired one. The egg apostle was forming into a complete face, proud of his work hatching the perfect world. The realms are merging as one. Even Guts' Baelit is reacting to whatever is happening to cause all this. Sudden pain forced Guts and Casca to the ground. They can feel something is here, is coming into their world. And Guts calls it God. We see the inside of the egg apostle one last time. The demon infant now turning into a very familiar shape. The living Baelit dies as he hatches. His purpose finally complete. The ritual is over. The blob explodes, raining back down to the earth below. Guts calling out for Griffith as the prophecy is repeated one last time. When the sky falls at the holy ground, where blind sheep gather and erect a pillar of fire, it will come. The grounds around the temple are completely in ruins. The tower is destroyed, a cloud of dust smothering everything in sight. The morning sun illuminating the destruction and chasing away the demons. The rest of the prostitutes are amazed to see the place reduced to ashes. What was once a spot revered by the Holy See, and the one chance villagers fleeing war and plagues could go, is now a pile of rubble. Our party survived the night, thankfully. Isidro, Jerome, Farnese, Serpico, Puck, and of course Guts and Casca. Nina survived too, who's honestly shocked that she made it out okay. They all reunite and set out to find Luca, the one party member unaccounted for. And just as she worries that her mentor is dead, they hear her calling from a well nearby. She jumped in to avoid the blob and was stuck there for the rest of the night. It seems like a happy ending. Everyone made it out okay. Oh, fuck, it's these guys. The Kushans decide now is the best time to show up. Not when the horrible monsters were eating everyone in sight, and our group is surrounded by the enemy, led by Salat. It turns out an oracle gave them a prophecy that led them to St. Albion, and they're searching for a specific figure that might have survived. Shockingly, it might not be Guts. Instead, the Kushans decide to capture everyone in hopes of finding the one they're looking for. A full-blown melee begins, everyone trying to fight off the sudden ambush, though having just spent an entire night trying not to die from horrible creatures, kinda made everyone understandably a bit tired. Some of the Kushans trap the women, intending on using them as bargaining chips, but that's when we see Azan survive the night as well, and he is ready to beat ass. Everyone prepares for another wave of enemies, only for Nosferatu's Zod to explode out of the rubble. The sudden appearance of the actual monster gives everyone the chance to slip away from the fight, but that's when Guts sees Skull Knight pointing at something in the distance. This entire ritual, the mock eclipse and mass sacrifice, was specifically designed to bring a certain somebody back into the mortal world. Griffith. He's back. The motherfucker just came back. Right in front of Guts. It really was a complete mirror of the eclipse. The original one turned Griffith into a demon, and the parallel eclipse turned him into a human. Or at least gave him a physical body. I won't really call him human. Everyone is just staring at him as Nosferatu Zod approaches and bows his head. Griffith was the prophesized one that the entire world wanted to summon. The God-hand manipulated reality itself to bring him back. For a moment, Guts is consumed with hate, wanting to rush over and kill him like he's been dreaming about for 2 years. But he's pulled back from the edge by Casca's cries, reminding him that his new goal is to keep her safe, not hunt after Griffith. The Kushans try and capture Griffith, Salat desperate to accomplish his mission in order to restore his clan to glory. But Nosferatu Zod demands they cease their bullshit violently. The rest of the party slip away during the slaughter, Guts and Casca too consumed by the image of Griffith to even move. Guts in complete shock, while Casca is almost instinctively trying to get close to him for some reason. The others manage to get away from the battle, seeing a massive army of Kushans a mere few feet away. The war party marches by as the group tries to go by unnoticed. Isidro is pissed off at the idea of leaving Guts and Casca behind, but they can't go back for them. And they all watch Zod fly off, the newly resurrected Griffith riding on his back. Then, a commotion kicks up from the ruins. It's Guts. He stole one of the Kushan horses and is riding out of there, Casca and Puck in tow, killing anyone that gets in his way. The party is sure that the trio will survive their escape, Isidro is certain that he'll see them again, and they also see that some villagers did survive the ordeal, the ones who booked it out of the slums as fast as possible. All the devoted believers who panicked and tried to seek sanctuary in the monastery were devoured, but the non-believers who put survival above all else made it out. Luca gathers flowers, mourning the Egg Apostle, and offering what little tribute she can. Even if he was a monster who killed thousands, he was still a pitiful soul who died completely alone. Having at least one person remember him is enough, though whatever world he wanted to create has yet to be seen. The arc comes to a close with our characters going their separate ways. Isidro chasing after Guts, still desperate to be his apprentice, and Nina is conflicted on whether or not she wants to stay with Luca. If she does, she'll always be protected, and she'll feel safe. But when she goes down to the river to soak her foot, she runs into Joachim. Turns out he was hiding in the mountains after leading the knights to the hideout. Despite everything, all the horror and suffering, he still really does like Nina. He admits he was afraid, and that he hates himself for being a coward, causing Nina to realize that the two are pretty much the same deep down. They're scared people looking for someone to give them comfort, so maybe they'd be alright together. Farnese thinks about everything that happened after she met Guts, how the Tower of Conviction fell apart like a sandcastle. She spent her entire life dedicated to religion, only for it all to come crashing down. She admits her faith was only a shield to hide from her problems, from her fear and parts of herself she can't stand. Azan despises himself for surviving the whole ordeal in the first place. He was buried by rubble, but saved from being crushed by his club. And he mentions that a similar incident happened before, where he was abandoned by the people he was trying to save. In fact, he says it's why he became a part of the Holy See in the first place. I would say this goes places, but that'd be a lie. Let's just rip that band-aid off right now. Yeah, it never gets covered who this dude was. Farnese surprises him and Serpico with her announcement. She's leaving the Holy See, abandoning her position and dedicating to her new quest. She'll follow the Black Swordsman, but not to hunt him. To her, Guts represents a new way of life, the chance to become brave, to finally face the fear she's dealt with since childhood. Hell, she refers to him as her saint. Serpico decides to go along, not about to abandon her now. Azan has the chance to run away himself, to abandon his life as a knight and choose a new road like his comrades, but somebody has to bear the brunt of what happened. And it's also possible he's dealing with some survivor's guilt, so he kinda wants to be punished for surviving. Cause as far as we know it, the Holy Iron Chain Knights are all dead. These are the only guys left standing. Jerome and the girls are stuck waiting for Nina, unaware of her choice to leave with Joachim. As much as she loves her friends, and especially Luca, Nina wants to try being with Joachim. Being with someone stronger than her just makes her resent them, resent herself. So she'll stay with somebody just as flawed and cowardly as she is. She wishes them all goodbye, hoping she'll get to see them all one day. Luca seems to pick up on what happened, simply calling Nina a troublesome girl. The last image of the Conviction arc is Skull Knight staring at the rubble from afar, talking about how the shape of the world has started to come apart. Holy fucking shit. This was a massive arc. If the time length has... it's should actually be. And I'd be lying if I didn't say they actually do have a point. It's just one of those subjective matters that nobody will ever 100% agree with. I still absolutely love this arc and almost everything it does. Almost. But once again, that's stuff to talk about when it's actually covered. Now, this arc is actually the second most adapted for the series, right behind Golden Age. Only instead of getting anime adaptations, it took the second season of Berserk 2016 to actually do that. It was instead turned into video games, Berserk PS2, and the more famous Sword of the Berserk for Dreamcast. I'm gonna hold off on talking about these for now because they actually do fit into the series, even if events of Berserk PS2 are not completely canon. But Sword of the Berserk is widely considered an actual part of the story, since the script for the game was written by Miura himself. And with it sort of being a standalone adventure, we have the luxury of placing it anywhere we want in the first quarter of Millennium Falcon War. But I do think there's a perfect place to address it, just not at the moment. Berserk PS2 doesn't really have much that actually deviates beyond moving certain events to different areas and not addressing the presence of some characters during said moments. The only real addition it has is a new Apostle Guts fights, which is a segment of the game that sort of bridges two plot points together, but after that it vanishes and it's mainly just adapting the arc as normal. Still, as stated, there's a time and a place. Before we get started, I just want to warn you guys, this video is going to be fucking long. Falcon of the Millennium Empire is the longest arc of Berserk, hands down, and there's a lot to talk about, to say the least. So this time, I'm really going to encourage you guys to use the timestamps down below if you just want to get to certain parts you want to hear, or what have you. This is going to be a leviathan of a video, so make sure you got some pizza and beer ready.
We start off the arc with some cryptic narration saying that the children were first to notice something about the world changed after the resurrection of Griffith. We see a group of village boys going hunting in the woods, an older brother trying to keep his younger sibling from rushing on ahead and getting lost. Despite how annoyed the older boy is, the small child insists he saw fairies deeper in the woods. Some of their friends actually do admit that something in the woods feels different. They can't really explain it, just that the woods feel wrong, like it was a forest from a dream they all had. At the mention of their shared discomfort, a strange noise echoes in the woods. One of the children says it sounds like someone was laughing. The laughter gets louder, completely surrounding the boys until it goes dead quiet, then replaced by a strong gust of wind. All the kids looking up to see Nosferatu's Zod flying just above. The children panic and run out of the forest, trying to get as far away from the monster as fast as they can. And as they do, we see Zod hovering above the tree line, a narration confirming that something about the world did change, that maybe there was a presence in the forest all along, and for some reason, it's becoming more and more obvious to people across the world. We even see the outline of some goblin-like creature laughing as it hides under the stump of a tree. Now, this is the first step towards explaining the actual magic system of Berserk. I said before in part 3 that there was a sort of kind of explanation that wasn't completely accurate. It had to do with people trying to perceive magic, and how closed-minded perception made Puck invisible to people like the Holy Iron Chain Knights up until he wasn't. But this arc is where it all gets completely explained, and it's definitely crazy to say the least. Can't say too much right now, just know that things get downright cosmic by the end. Moving on from that, we transition over to a pretty sad scene. Erica is clearing the snow off a gravestone, Godo's gravestone. Unfortunately, the old man died not long after Guts left to save Casca. The trio returned, but it's a bittersweet reunion. Erica is relieved to see Casca back safe, but Guts is clearly upset he wasn't able to be there before the old man passed. Though she says that Godo was just happy to see him one last time before he died, and that he wouldn't want Guts to see his face once he was gone anyway. But now that everyone is back home safe, the big question pops up. What's the plan now? Erica wants them all to live together, but is that what Guts really wants? Even after she promises that they can spruce up the cave into an actual home, and if they keep Casca happy, then she won't run away again, Guts seems to agree, but he's still torn up inside. Right as he changed course, to let go of his old obsession and focus on the little good he has left in his life, Griffith came back. He's back on Earth, somewhere Guts could reach him. And he came back just like the old days, a sight so impossible and powerful that Guts forgot he wanted to kill him. And that is bullshit! All of the horrible, unspeakable things Guts had to go through just to find the God Hand again. All the pain, all the violence, all the people Guts had to kill, and now he shows up. Well, at least he flew off to someplace far away. That temptation to chase after Griffith vanished along with him and Nosferatu Zod. Who knows what the guy's doing? Guts has this new chance at a life at Godo's. He should really just take it and live a peaceful life. Oh, I guess a friend of Rickard showed up. Oh, that motherfucker. Yeah, he's there. He's there. Standing, chatting with Rickard at the Sword Cemetery, the memorial for the people he murdered. Erica innocently describing the old friend with long silver hair, a man so pretty you can hardly tell his gender, as though he was pulled out of a fairy tale. Rickard is completely ignorant to what actually happened. Guts never told him, and Casca can't talk. All he knows is that one day nobody came back. He's just happy to see Griffith again. Oh, and Guts is here too. It really is a big happy reunion. Wait, why is he trying to kill him? Yep. This time, Guts is operating off pure reflex. He's going straight for Griffith. Rickard in complete shock at what's going on. The boy latches onto Guts to get him to stop, but the big guy assures him that's not Griffith. His brand is bleeding like crazy too. This is the real deal. While Guts and Rickard argue, Griffith chimes in, saying Guts never changes. He always swings first and talks later. Griffith seems cheerful for their meeting, but Guts is insulted at how he's talking so casually, as if nothing happened. Guts demands to know why Griffith even came here, and he admits he wanted to see Guts. They couldn't speak at the Tower of Conviction, but now they have plenty of time. In a way, it's also a more fitting place, saying that this is where the Band of the Hawk can assemble once again, referencing the graveyard. Guts screams that Griffith better never use that name again, not after what he did. But Griffith admits that he came to the graveyard for another reason. He wanted to know if the site would evoke any emotional reaction. Now that he's in a physical body, he wants to be sure that his humanity is well and truly gone. The way he puts it, he's free. Guts throws Rickert aside and lunges again, screaming out in disbelief that Griffith doesn't feel anything. He betrayed all these men, sentenced them to death and eternal torment, and Griffith simply doesn't give a shit. The way he sees it, he's still got his mind on the prize. He's going to have his own kingdom no matter what. Guts takes a swing, but Nosferatu Zod rushes in to protect Griffith. It seems like the two are completely allied now, and Zod respects the God Hand enough to protect him from danger. And to make matters worse, Casca feels a twinge in her own brand. Even Puck notices something is off, feeling a strong presence nearby. And here comes probably one of the best fights of the series, the fight on the Hill of Swords. Guts and Zod try to kill each other in a duel just like the old days. Only this time, Guts has way more experience. So instead of being a one-sided ass whooping where Guts gets thrown around like a toy, these two beat the shit out of each other. It's absolute chaos. Zod is proud to see Guts become such a powerful warrior, who's confused to see the two together in the first place. He even demands Zod move to give him a shot at Griffith, but Zod says he has to force his way through. Even if he went back on his word that he doesn't give a shit about the God Hand, Zod is still Zod. He's a warrior at heart, so he's not one to step down without a fight. They continue their duel, and it seems like Zod managed to put Guts on the defensive. He even starts to worry that it's going to end exactly like last time. But it won't, because this time he can fight. He's killed countless demons, and Zod is no different from the rest of them. He's just another monster, and Griffith is right there. All he needs is for Zod to get out of the way. Rickert is still very confused. For some reason, Nosferatu Zod showed up, and Guts can actually push him back, all because he really wants to kill Griffith. So much so that he actually started to cut through Zod's sword. It starts to chip, and Guts broke through his blade just enough for Zod to worry. So the infamous warrior starts grabbing the swords around him to dual wield against Guts. Absolute dick move on multiple levels. For one, they're gravestones, and two, Rickert worked really hard on those. The positive side to this is that Guts can tell that Zod wants to end the fight. He's not enjoying the battle anymore, he's actually trying to kill Guts at full force. But Guts is just as desperate to kill him, kicking up a sword into Zod's abdomen. It's a true stalemate. Zod and Guts are on equal ground now, and considering how he started, that's saying quite a fucking lot. But this is where something weird happens. Despite Griffith feeling nothing as he stood over the graves of the men he murdered, confident he was free of his humanity, he feels a twinge in his chest at the sight of Guts in danger. It turns out, Griffith and the demon infant have completely merged into one being, so he must simply be feeling some leftover emotions. And I guess that Guts is technically his dad now. This is weird. Like, do they play catch or something? The duel between Guts and Zod is still going, but we've officially reached Phase 2. Zod is frustrated that his sword doesn't quite match up to the Dragon Slayer, so he decides to transform into his demonic form, fully intent on finishing the fight once and for all. The sight of the monster that traumatized the Band of the Hawk all those years ago blows Rickert's mind. Remember, he is aware of demons and apostles, but he doesn't know the full story. Guts remained very vague, and Skull Knight himself never sat down and explained what was going on. But this time, it seems to finally hit Rickert that something is very wrong here. Despite Zod's transformation, Guts keeps himself steady during the battle. In fact, he's able to get a good hit against Zod. In a way, turning into a violent monster might have actually made Zod weaker than Guts. The guy has been fighting nothing but violent monsters for 2 years straight. That's not to say Guts completely dominates the duel from here on out. In fact, Zod is still a force to be reckoned with, even slamming straight into the side of the mountain that contained the ore cave, crashing through their safe area and ruining the only sanctuary Guts and Casca had left. And this situation is only made worse by Casca showing up, mindlessly stumbling her way towards the scene, still unaware of what's going on. She spots Griffith and calls out to him, just in time for Zod to explode out of the mountain, sending stones raining down towards her. Guts tries to save her, but Zod throws him out of the way against a nearby boulder. The only thing that saved Casca from being crushed was Griffith diving in to save her. It's not exactly clear why he did this, until you remember that he's feeling the faint emotions of the demon infant inside of him. It seems like it influenced Griffith to go save his mother, which kinda raises the question of why he didn't do the same for Guts. I mean, I guess their relationship hasn't exactly been the most positive, so Guts' son is a mama's boy. Casca tries to touch Griffith's face, but the agony from her brand is too much, sending her to the ground. The sight of the two together, especially Casca collapsing in pain, distracts Guts, who is almost begging for Griffith to get away from her. And this window is enough for Zod to come in for an attack, only to be stopped by Griffith. He seems satisfied by his visit and wants to leave. So that's exactly what they do. Zod's bloodlust is flipped off like a switch, and he spreads his wings. Guts demands to know where the two are going, and Griffith simply says that he's going to get his kingdom. Nothing changed. And just before he leaves, he offers Rickert to come along with him. The dream never ended, and if he learns the truth and hates Griffith, that's fine. But if he still wants to come along and help Griffith get his throne, he'll be welcomed with open arms. It'd be just like the old days. Also, Guts is still really angry, firing his crossbow at Griffith as he flies off. Rickert stops him, and the conversation ends with Guts calling bullshit that nothing changed. Everything changed. The old Band of the Hawk was dead and gone. It was Griffith's fault that happened. But the way he puts it, Guts should have known it would happen. He was the one man that knew Griffith more than anybody, so none of this was out of character for him. With that, they're left alone on the hill. Rickert ordering Guts to tell him exactly what happened that day in the tornado, but Guts is silent, merely watching Griffith fly away, who, by the way, is thinking about how he dove in to save Casca, the woman he raped and treated as a bargaining chip the entire time he knew her, all because the demon infant gave him that slight thump in the chest. When all your emotions are cauterized in your mind, even a tiny push in a direction can affect your thoughts. And by golly, does this plot point end up being important. Part 5 is going to be very interesting, people, trust me. But before all that, the truth is revealed. Guts tells Rickert what actually happened. He collapses to the ground in utter disbelief that Griffith would actually murder the one family he's ever known. Puck also listened in on the conversation, realizing that the flashes he saw before were of Casca being raped during the eclipse. And to make matters all the worse, the sanctuary is completely buried under the rubble. Their only chance at escaping the demons is destroyed. Now they have no choice but to leave. Rickert then demands to travel with Guts, that he wouldn't be able to live with himself if Guts was the only one trying to avenge the Hawks. It's too much for one man, and they were his family too. But Guts tells him to stay. Rickert could never truly hate Griffith, not the way Guts can. And when Erica overhears that Rickert wants to leave, she breaks down crying and runs away, upset that so many people she grew to care about are leaving forever. So Rickert himself has to make a choice. Go with Guts to hunt Griffith or stay with Erica. And thankfully, he does chase after the young girl. Now it's just down to our main trio. Puck asks Guts what the plan is. Do they still keep chasing revenge? But Guts makes it clear that he refuses to leave Casca ever again, meaning chasing revenge is simply impossible. He can't protect her and fight an entire legion of the damned to kill Griffith, and it seems that the two of them staying together means even more demons will come for them. Their only choice is to find another elf sanctuary, but that simply means locking Casca up like a prisoner again, which is what caused her to run away in the first place. Then Puck gets an idea. Why go to an elf sanctuary when they can go to the elf sanctuary, his home, the land of the elves? And with that, Guts' new quest begins. Rickert begs them to stay one more night, but it's impossible. They'll only put Rickert and Erica in danger. Rickert makes one last attempt to join Guts, but he simply tells him not to abandon what he can't replace. Godo's last words to Guts before he died. Guts, Puck, and Casca take their leave, starting a new quest to find the homeland of the elves. Guts thinks about how it's snowing, just like the day he left the Band of the Hawk. Only this time, Griffith was the one who deserted him. The man said he's off to get his own kingdom, that Guts should know what he's going to do, but he can't think about that now. He wraps Casca in his cloak, promising to never abandon her again. The Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc has officially kicked off. And this is the point where we can go ahead and take a step back for a second. It's weird to do this in the middle of a chapter. I'm not even kidding. It's literally right in the middle. But don't worry, none of it after this is Guts related for a while. The next 4.5 chapters to put things in perspective. And the thing we're going to talk about happens before the next time we see Guts and Casca. It's time to talk about Sword of the Berserk, Guts' Rage.
An outcast warrior enters a land plagued by an evil fate. He is not like ordinary men, for he carries the Dragon Slayer, a mighty blade of retribution, whose fury knows no equal. His enemies will know true fear once he starts to swing.
Sword of the Berserk is the 1999 Dreamcast game based off the manga. It was developed by Yuke's company, published by Eidos Interactive, and it follows an original story written by Miura and takes place some point after Guts and Casca leave Goto's cabin. Now, I mainly want to talk about the story since it's far and away the best part of the game, but there's some other stuff that I want to mention. For one, Susumu Hirasawa also did the soundtrack to this game on top of the 97 anime, and it kicks ass. I really like the slower, more melodic version of Forces that serves as the main theme. Plus some other tracks. Mainly boss fight ones. I'm not kidding when I say they really stand out as some serious earworms. I really like the one that plays during the fight with the Mandragora heart, where the chorus sounds almost like a screaming child. It's really good. Another thing that really stood out and surprised me was the voice acting. Now, games in the 90s were pretty hit and miss when it came to voice acting, especially Japanese ones. The Resident Evil 1 dub is still hailed as one of the worst ever recorded, but after around the middle of the decade, there was a major push to actually give a shit with their voice cast, mainly after the release of the first Metal Gear Solid, and most importantly, the Legacy of Kain games. Legacy of Kain especially impacted the dub to Sword of the Berserk, mainly because, as stated, Eidos Interactive was involved in publishing, meaning they handled the localization, and a certain voice actor from Soul Reaver provided a role for the game. Guts himself is played by Michael Bell, Raziel's voice actor, and he definitely elevates the material.
I don't trust you, Balzac. I sense that you're not coming clean with me on this. But I'll do it for my Casca.
In fact, he's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, he's definitely one of the more underrated voice actors for Guts. Now, the main villain is played by Earl Bowen, and I think I'm just crazy, but doesn't the guy sound almost exactly like Tony Jay?
It started some years ago in a nearby town. No one has found a cure for it yet.
So when Guts and the main bad guy are in the same room, all I can think about is Raziel talking to the Elder God.
I've sent my soldiers to the village countless times since then, to get the heart of the great tree, but not a single one has returned alive. But we desperately need it for our research. I've seen your abilities, Gatsu. I have a job for you.
A job?
A proposition. Infiltrate the Mandragora village and take the heart of the great tree.
Raziel, the failed assassin. You had Kain at your mercy, but lacked the courage to fulfill the act. And now you see the wasteland wrought by the tyrant's hand, by his selfish decision to preserve his own life, even when it meant sacrificing the whole world. This is the fate of Nosgoth, as long as Kain remains alive.
An ironic condemnation, given this guilty sin. One would think you'd torn down the pillars single-handedly. What are you trying to obliterate as you drag your loathsome body through this chamber? And why, as Nosgoth descends into madness and misery, do you appear to thrive? Things in this world, I am learning, are rarely what they seem. You, apparently, are no exception.
But he's not. He's Errol Bowen. Paul Eating also provides his voice, but it's for a relatively small role.
He says he's forcing them out of the towns and villages because they're dangerous and conducting human experiments in the name of research. But anyone who discovers the truth does not live long. Like this young woman almost found out.
Still, it's nuts that all these recognizable guys are in a relatively obscure license title like this. Now, the actual gameplay is rough. It's a common criticism you hear about Sword of the Berserk. This is a hack-and-slash action game coming out right before something like Devil May Cry or God of War, so they don't exactly know how to do things properly. You have a very noticeable clunk to the whole package, and it's really hard to get a decent flow of things, at least if you want to get creative. Wielding the Dragon Slayer itself is pretty good. It has a good weight to it, and only a few hits can send someone flying. But this is where you run into the other issue of the game. The level design doesn't really complement Guts that well. You have this huge brute with a massive sword that he swings like a fucking baseball bat, so let's put him in a very constricted, tight hallway that never lets him get a decent rhythm. The sad part is that the segments where they do let you out in the open are pretty fun. Your side items feel powerful and the enemies melt when you're allowed to go batshit nuts. It even has one of those sort of devil trigger rage modes that honestly does look pretty good. The boss fights definitely feel like a grand spectacle, even if, once again, the combat isn't exactly the most refined. It's not as bad as what you hear. I mean, some people outright say the Zod fight's impossible, but it's not. It's actually really fun. You even get an interesting mechanic where sometimes you get a quick time event that, depending on whether or not you fail, can lead to different stages as you get through a level. It's not as though it completely changes the story or unlocks a new ending. Honestly, the game is really short, like can be beaten in less than 5 hours short, but it's kind of neat to see how different paths can be taken in each level. But the actual reason I want to talk about the game is the story. As stated, this was written by Kentaro Miura himself, and since it never contradicts or retcons anything, it's safe to say the game can fit snugly into canon without any problems. Only a few elements can raise an eyebrow if you're an absolute purist, but we'll talk about that when we get there. The best way to describe Sword of the Berserk is that it's essentially a standalone Black Swordsman style adventure, but with post-conviction guts. And this actually ends up being one of the more interesting aspects to the plot. The only times we've had these pulpy Monster of the Week style mini arcs was during a time where Guts wasn't okay. He was very impulsive, callous, and mainly just killed things, while Puck was the one trying to figure out what was actually happening. This time, however, Guts is a bit more chill. He's still a prick, sometimes exceptionally so, but this is at a point where his priorities have completely changed. He's more open to working with others, and his banter with Puck is more sardonic than bitter and cruel.
And I mean, thanks for saving us. See ya.
Okay.
A performer, eh? I kinda like her.
Hey, Guska, where are you going?
Oh.
She probably wants to see that show. The town's right over there. Well, why don't you take her?
Forget it, Puck. I don't have time to waste on something like that.
But even you need to take a break once in a while. All work and no play will make you a grump. Come on, come on, come on. I wanna go. We both wanna go. Please, please, please. Oh, please, come on, let us go. Let's live a little. Come on, Gatsu. Please.
Sure, whatever. We need to get food anyway. I'm starving.
But to really paint what I'm saying, let's go ahead and talk about the actual story in the game real quick. It won't take long, I promise. Sword of the Berserk opens up with a traveling performer named Rita stuck on the side of the road after her wagon breaks down. She, her dog, and her companions are attacked by bandits, taking advantage of their new vulnerability. Well, just as things are about to get violent, Casca wanders in, wanting to pet Rita's dog. The bandits are happy at the idea of having another woman to sell off at the slave market, And that's when Guts shows up. A major ass beating takes place, and soon all the bandits are dead. Rita is thankful for the trio coming along to save them, and invites them all to watch her performance in the nearby city. Guts doesn't want to go, purely focused on protecting Casca and continuing their journey, but Puck talks him into letting them see the performance. It also helps that his brand starts bleeding due to something in Rita's wagon. They arrive in town to see the crowd excited for Rita's throwing knife tricks. Her companion, a strong man named Job, accidentally falls over during his routine and exposes his face, revealing that he has a pretty hideous growth on his body. The crowd instantly turn on them, calling Job a mandragora and viciously attacking him. The stress of the situation causes Job to fully transform into a horrible monster, slaughtering anyone around him in a blind rage. Guts murders Job, much to Rita's despair, and from there we see the arrival of Lord Balzac. If you can't see that this dude is the main bad guy, what are you doing here? He looks like Ganondorf and carries a cane. He's so obviously the bad guy. Well, he's impressed that Guts was able to kill such a violent creature, and takes him to his castle to make a deal. It turns out the Mandragoras refer to a mysterious outbreak happening in Balzac's land. People develop horrible growths, go insane, and eventually mutate into monsters that kill each other. The disease comes from the plants that have slowly infested the land. Mandrake plants that, if pulled from the ground, scream loud enough to kill any living thing around them. On top of that, their poison is the cause of the outbreak. However, it is revealed that the plant can also be used to cure any and all ailments, from diseases to even mental illness. But their only hope of curing the illness for good is to get the great heart of the Mandragora plant, which first sprouted in a nearby village that now acts as a safe haven for victims seeking to escape Balzac's influence. He's sent soldiers into the village multiple times, but nobody has ever come back, and Balzac himself nearly died when he led the charge himself once. Balzac has his dungeons filled with Mandragora victims and claims that he's searching for a way to cure his subjects, but Guts plain doesn't trust him, sensing immediately something is wrong. As they're talking, Puck notices a painting on the wall of a woman revealed to be Balzac's wife. Guts agrees to go to the village with the promise that Balzac would use some of the cure he creates to heal Casca's mind. And just as their meeting finishes, rebels attack the castle, kidnapping Casca in the process. During the raid, some of the Mandragora victims transform, wreaking havoc in the dungeons as Guts has to fight his way out. He manages to find the rebels, who explain that Balzac is actually a tyrant. He's been kidnapping victims of the outbreak and experimenting on them, along with violently oppressing his people. Rita is horrified at the entire situation, almost shocked at how cruel people are being to each other, but Guts seems pretty apathetic to the larger picture. He only cares about healing Casca, though he does actually apologize to Rita for killing Job, trying to give her some little comfort that is possible in the situation.
Puck, I've always depended only on myself. No one else using my own strength or taming me. No one to love.
And Job, that Mandragoran guy was...
He followed me because I fed him. I was surprised at first, but he was really childlike. Always smiling, laughing, even though he didn't understand. I can't believe that now he's gone.
Forgive me, Rita.
Oh, wow, he apologized. I can't believe it. Oh!
The rebels agree to let Guts go to the village, but they want to accompany him, to make sure Balzac doesn't get the Great Heart all to himself. They plan to use it as leverage to guarantee a cure is distributed to the infected. Guts despises the idea of leaving Casca alone to finish his mission, but Puck assures them that they'll be safe in the rebel hideout. It's an elf sanctuary. Well, as they set out on their journey, the rebel hideout is attacked by Balzac's men, and Casca is captured. As Guts and the rebels travel to the village, they're attacked by mutated animals infected by the Mandragora. They finally make it to the village, and find the story about it being a safe haven for the infected is true. One of the rebels investigates a strange plant growing in the town, only to accidentally uproot a mandrake. The screaming causes some of the villagers to transform and attack the rebels, and Guts is soon the only one left alive, viciously fighting for his life as a nun rushes in to stop the violence. Her name is Areza, and she's been the one attending to the infected, who all live in an almost childlike state. Their minds are empty, but they're seemingly happy in their mental prisons. Rita then arrives to explain that the hideout was attacked and Casca was captured. Balzac makes his demands clear. Bring the Elder Heart, and he'll get Casca back. Rita feels sympathy for Ariza and the creatures, but Guts isn't convinced. He'll still chop them to pieces if it comes down to it. Ariza attempts to explain that the creatures remind her of a boy she once knew, known as Nico. He was slow-minded, heavily implied to have some form of mental retardation, and because of this, he was treated very cruelly by the rest of the villagers. But Ariza always liked the boy for having a bright and happy attitude despite how terrible everyone was to him. Well, during one winter, the crops failed, and everyone was obsessively hoarding food to themselves. Nico had no home, so the most he could do was go around and beg someone to feed him, but he went days without eating. One day, he decided to try the church, since Ariza was always very kind to him, but she was too busy to hear him come into the building, so once again he was left without any food and starved to death inside. Ariza was destroyed at the discovery that he was that close to salvation, but she just didn't notice he came in. We also see that Nico had a lucky charm. A Bailet. I'm gonna talk about this in a bit, just hold on. Ariza begs them to leave the village alone, that the only reason people were attacked was because of an unspoken rule the Mandragora victims set up. Stay away from the Elder Heart and they'll be fine. But Rita points out that the Mandragora is spreading. It's covering more territory, so that doesn't make sense. And Guts, plain and simple, doesn't care about Ariza's story. He's taking the Elder Heart no matter what. The nun runs off and Guts chases after her. Now I know this sounds like Black Swordsman Guts, grade A asshole, but this might actually not be as bad as you think it is. I'm gonna explain it in a bit if it's not blatantly obvious at this point when I'm gonna bring up, but Ariza might not exactly be completely honest about all the details here. But before that, we get a scene with Casca in prison. She's still in a daze, not really sure of what's all just happened in this adventure, and then we see Puck come to her rescue, except that it's nighttime, and that means spookies are here to fuck shit up, and Guts isn't there to protect her, nor the demon infant, so Casca and Puck are all alone to deal with these horrible spirits. Then Nosferatu Zod crashes through the roof. Dude, we just saw you fly off with Griffith, what the hell? He acts like he's been trying to find Guts again, sensing a branded person nearby and accidentally stumbling into Casca instead of Guts. Nevertheless, his presence chases away the bad spirits, and he leaves once again to go find Guts and call him a nerd. With their prison in ruins, Casca and Puck explore Balzac's castle. Through their snooping around, they discover a woman they believe to be Balzac's daughter, who is almost the spitting image of her mother. She also acts very similar to Casca, mindless and in a childlike state. They also discover a secret room in the castle, with a mandrake heart sitting inside of it. Turns out they did have one. It's just small and worn down from the experiments. Casca cradles it like a baby, even humming a song to it. Her maternal instincts taking over without really knowing what she's holding isn't even human. Balzac arrives and is royally pissed off, just in time for the mandrake heart to awaken and latch itself onto Casca. The screams loud enough to enrage every mandragoran in the dungeons, and for the mandrake plants to pop out of the ground and infest the city. Guts and Rita discover a secret catacomb under the village church, and after fighting their way through the mandragorans, they find Ariza standing with the Elder Heart, the heavily mutated corpse of Nico, herself transformed and clearly corrupted. So now I can explain the deal with the Bailet. Ariza was distraught after the death of the boy, so it's implied she used the Bailet to become an apostle, and used her new abilities to turn Nico's corpse into the first mandrake plant. From there, she started turning the villagers into mandragoran, believing their infections make them happier. This is why Guts was so hostile to her and showed no sympathy to the victims. This isn't an actual plague. It's an apostle that was transforming humans into her brainwashed mutants. Guts' brain would react to the presence of mandragoran, so he kind of already knew what was going on. When in doubt, blame a demon. Guts seemingly kills Ariza and tries to take Nico's corpse, only for Ariza to snatch him back, screaming that no one will take the boy from her. Guts chases after her, and they come back to the surface to find the village in ruins. Balzac's men came to steal the heart for themselves. Some of his soldiers mutated into enhanced versions thanks to essences extracted from the mandragora plants they've been experimenting with, and they show no intention on honoring their deal with Guts. Ariza decides to sacrifice herself and Nico instead of letting Balzac steal the Elder Heart, walking into fire so they can burn to death. Just before the soldiers can attack, Nosferatu Zod swoops in. He found Guts again, and he's not wasting time. Guts thinks Zod is there to help Griffith weaponize the Mandragora, but he insists that's not the case. He just wants to kick Guts' ass. They fight, but before they can finish each other off, Zod calls a truce. He knows Guts needs to rush back to the city to save Casca, and in all honesty, Zod was deviating from his orders to waste time with Guts. They would need to find a better opportunity to really go at each other's throats. We also see that some of the victims of the Mandragora that survived the recent events have actually been cured of their curse. The plants are falling off, and the victims are coming back to their senses, and they immediately assume Guts was the one who caused everything.
dicks. Still, Guts and Rita make it back to find the city in ruins. The mandrake plants that still remain are infecting villagers, who transformed into Mandragora and went on a rampage. Guts fights his way back to the castle, killing as many of the creatures as he can and wiping out what's left of Balzac's army. The final confrontation begins, all parties meeting up in Balzac's throne room. Here is where the endgame kicks off. Balzac gives a bad guy speech revealing that he was actually once a respectful, kind ruler that tried to do good, but his beloved wife was sickly, so much so that Balzac resorted to any method he could to save her, including creating a potion using the extract of a mandrake plant. The woman they found isn't Balzac's daughter, it's his wife. It really will cure any ailment as it purged all illness from Balzac's wife's body, and in fact even reversed her age. But the side effects, even in small doses, are extreme. While her lifespan was extended and she can heal from any disease, her mind is broken, just like Casca's. Ever since, Balzac has been trying to take care of her, but the strain of ruling his land and caring for his now insane wife got to him. He's become cruel, and views his position as a burden he wants to get rid of. Balzac drinks a much higher concentrated dose of the Mandragoran potion and mutates into an enhanced state. Him and Guts fight, and it looks like Balzac is killed. As the rest of the party try to make their escape to find Casca, we see the Baelit roll next to Balzac and his wife. The Mandragoran roots have kicked into overdrive, fully consuming the castle as the party tries to run for their lives. Also, quick side note, fuck this running section, it's terrible. Okay, back to the summary. Guts, Puck, and Rita come back to the main hall of the castle, where they spot a massive mandrake plant with Casca trapped inside. Guts makes quick work of the monster and saves Casca, and it seems like some of the essence of the creature actually affected her. For a brief moment, she recognizes Guts, talking about how she was stuck in a horrible dream.
Casca, Casca, hang in there, my love.
Gatsu?
Casca. You know who I am.
Gatsu. My dear. I was dreaming. A really bad dream.
Casca.
But almost as soon as it happens, Casca reverts back to her empty-minded state.
Guts.
Casca. Casca. Casca.
Damn it. We then come back to Balzac. He's still alive, but close to death, his wife just giggling as she stands over him. He starts laughing along with her, saying the situation really was funny. And then the Baelit activates. Yep. Balzac sacrificed his wife to become an apostle, now becoming this horrific chimera monster. This is the final boss of the game, and of course, Guts kicks his ass. The monster is defeated, half the city is dead, a mentally ill woman was damned to hell for eternity, and now everyone is openly oppressing all the former Mandragoran victims. We saved the world, guys. Guts, Puck, and Casca walk off into the sunset, excited for their new adventure. Rita is simply saying thank you for the time they spent together.
Take care of yourselves.
You too, Rita.
What an adventure. I'll remember you all. Forever and ever.
Forever.
You're a cold fish, as usual. Won't you ever say anything nice for a change?
Oh, you got enough mouth for both of us, Puck.
You're always a crumb.
Thank you.
So that's sort of the Berserk. As you saw, it's a pretty simple story, but I'd say it was effective. A nice little mini arc to enjoy. It's basically filler if you want to put it into the main timeline, admittedly, but hey, it's still debated whether or not it's actually canon, and I think it works when you consider what the arc actually represents. The story has a pretty obvious theme about stigma and the treatment of the mentally ill, which is a big aspect of the coming arc, considering a certain party member is now severely mentally ill, and Balzac himself is essentially a mirror to what Guts could become on his journey. Balzac tried to be a strong
strong ruler, while also caring for a wife that was no longer herself. He really did love her, but trying to balance these two roads drove him insane. Let's just say this plays a factor in some things to come. Now, you might have noticed some quirks to the rules the lore set up, or maybe I'm attributing something to someone where that's not actually the case. But if it wasn't, that also creates some story issues. It's pretty minor, but here's what I mean. So I said before that Ereza more than likely used the Beylit to become an apostle after Nico died, and from there created the Mandragoran as her way of making people happy. But that raises the question of why didn't all the Mandragoran die out when she herself was lit on fire with the Elder Heart? The demon itself was dead. Why wasn't the infection cured? Why did it take later? We never actually got a clear answer on whether or not killing the apostle would cure whoever they transformed, but you'd assume at the very least the Mandrakes would. If you want to assume she wasn't the apostle, then who was? Balzac only turned into a demon after sacrificing his wife, and Guts' brand did react to the presence of the infected, so it was a demonic plague. Unless maybe the logic is if someone is transformed, then there's simply no going back, which does make sense in some of the more extreme cases, like Rosine melting down children and reshaping them into elves, or the heavier stages of mutations for Zondark. Simply, there's a threshold where the only cure is to kill them, but still it's kinda weird. Now I'm actually okay with the fact the Beylit was used twice, since that's actually the case for the Count's Beylit after Guts picked it up at the end of Gardens of Desire. It's heavily implied this thing's gonna be used again sometime in the future. At least that was the plan. Plus, you get this after credits scene where Skull Knight shows up and eats the Beylit, which is cool, because Skull Knight is fucking awesome. But there you go, that's Sword of the Berserk. The gameplay radically shifts between being fun and being hilariously clunky, but the story itself is super good. It's a very simple, basic, shady guy as protagonist to do a job and you find out he had ulterior motives sort of deal, but it works for this segment of Berserk. And really, this is just a treat for fans, since it was the first video game adaptation of the source material. Now, none of the new characters come back, so it's safe to assume they all died during the subsequent Kushin invasion. I'm sorry, Rita. I will say if you decide to sit down and play the game, since you can find an ISO and a Dreamcast emulator fucking anywhere now, it is a good time. You will tear your hair out during some segments because, oh boy, that combat, but it's a nice little addition to the series you're already very loyal and invested in. Though I will say some characterization is a little weird. Like, Guts is way more open about his relationship with Casca than he's ever been anywhere else in the series. Like, he's directly calling her his beloved and saying my love and all that in front of other people, when he's never talked like that before. He's kind of kept it on the down low. It's not much, but it is kind of something where it's like, oh, that's new. It's an element that was always there, but just went unstated that's just suddenly being addressed. Now, it's not a problem. I'm not complaining about it. And as stated, Michael Bell still knocks it out of the park with the role of Guts. And I really do think a lot of it comes down to a weird translation issue, because some of the dialogue can be paced a little awkward, and it's pretty obvious that the script wasn't a one-to-one transition. It had some stuff lost in translation. But you know, that was the nature of the beast. It was a 90s anime game, what could you do? But now it's time to come back and talk about the actual manga again. We're coming back right where we left off, halfway through chapter 182. I wasn't kidding when I said Sword of the Berserk take place right between these segments. Technically it takes place during this whole section, but it was the only logical place to include it. The Kushin invasion is in full swing, raiding cities and killing everyone in their way. The men are executed in many terrible ways, while the women are captured. They're certain that they'll be raped and forced to have Kushin children, but some of them believe they might be used as sacrifices for their rituals. The villagers lament the disappearance of Griffith, now considered a mythical figure, cause the way they see it, if Griffith was still around, the invasion would have never happened. That's when a young girl says that something is coming. The wind is whispering to her. The hawk of light is coming. The rest of the women write her off as insane. She just watched her family burn to death, so she simply lost her mind. And we see the Kushin commander in charge of the city invasion celebrating their victory. It turns out they asked the city to surrender multiple times, but they refused. The fear of the Kushin army is too strong. Though in all fairness, if the people surrendered, they'd be used as war slaves, so it's not exactly a great solution. Nevertheless, they managed to capture 6 fortresses. It's been a steamroll campaign. Salat and his men returned to report their failure at capturing Griffith. Their story about how he flew away with Zod is met with mockery. Salat fires back by saying that the entire reason for the invasion was because an oracle saw a sign, so they can't exactly dismiss the possibility of mysticism. But the commander just kicks Salat in the face and shit talks him pretty hard. We actually find out that the Bakiraka clan, the feared assassins that gave our protagonist so much trouble in the old days, the ones that were quite literally regarded in Midland as legendary figures, are actually pretty not well liked in the Kushan Empire. Turns out they were reduced to this state because they sided with the royal family during a rebellion, so when they were defeated, the Bakiraka were driven out from the Kushan Empire. The new emperor only just recently recognized the clan as soldiers of the formal Kushan military. Salat seemingly gets pissed off, rising to his feet to beat this dude's ass. But it turns out, he was moving to catch an arrow flying straight for the commander's head. There were some Midland Knights who survived the attack. Salat's men make quick work of the survivors, showing some martial arts skills strong enough to, quite frankly, rip these poor schmucks to pieces. The skills of the Bakiraka impressed the commander, who is now conveniently regretting how he talked serious smack about their clan. Salat and his boys go to leave, saying that they need to return to their mission of searching for Griffith, who is right there. An exile from the Bakiraka. I don't know what you have to do to be exiled from an exiled clan of assassins, but it probably wasn't pleasant. Roxas was also guided by the vision, and says that one day, he'll cut Griffith's head off to make it his. But for now, he'll make sure no one will touch him. Salat's men try to fight, but Roxas has inhuman agility, flowing through the master martial artists like liquid. Then another guy shows up. A single warrior smashes through the barricaded gate with his warhammer. An absolute giant of a man dressed in armor styled like a dragon. Along with his massive hammer, he wields a shield cannon combo that tears through the Kushans, then reveals that the shield also has blades to it. One of the Kushans run into the stronghold to deploy the rest of their troops, only to find that they're already dead. Mysterious figures standing in the smoke of the fires. So if it hasn't been blatantly obvious here, every single one of these dudes are apostles. Griffith raised an army of demons to conquer Midland, under the guise of liberating them from the Kushans. So while everyone views them as all great and powerful heroes, they're actually horrific monstrosities that enjoy killing and eating people. Fuck. We then see a small bird fly away from the city, going to an empty tree on a faraway hill. The bird lands in the hands of a young girl dressed as a witch. We see a silhouette of the girl flow out of the bird and back into her. It makes sense later, all I'll say. The girl actually has her own elf companion traveling with her, only this one's a lot more feminine looking than Puck. So elves do have genders. The elf calls the girl Shrike. Yeah, it's time to talk about that. Berserk has a weird thing with names sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time, but there are occasions where people debate over how to actually pronounce some of the character names. The setting is pretty blatantly inspired by Dark Ages Europe, so European-style pronunciations make sense, but there are occasions where it's taken a bit too far. There's some people who call Farnese Farnese and Serpico Serpico. It's not technically wrong, but it's adding extra steps to pretty simple names, at least how I see it. It sort of feels like people taking how the Japanese pronunciations sound as gospel, not really recognizing that there's cases where you have to adjust the verbiage due to the language barrier. The Japanese name for guts is Gatsu, but that's not how you say his name in English. And Shrike is a case where her name is debated. There's cases where the name is blatantly supposed to be a simple English word, but due to how the Japanese language works, they have to adjust to make it fit. Did you know that Naruto's name is actually Nult? Some people swear up and down her name is actually Silk, but most people pronounce her name as Shirake. That feels weird to say, and I've always just kind of called her Shrike, like the bird, because she has a running theme with being compared to birds. If you're one of the types that go batshit insane on how I pronounce things, absolutely nothing will change. Enjoy the migraine. And to the people in the comments that go, Apostle actually has a silent T, I know. I knew the whole time. But you can't stop me. Welcome to hell. The point is that Shrike has a weird name, so I'm calling her Shrike to make it easy. Also, she knows Griffith is evil, so that's cool. Yeah, that's not even a joke. She flat out guesses right away he's evil. The villagers all fall in love with Griffith, entranced by his presence and fully believing he is the savior come to liberate Midland, like something out of a tale of legend. So it's something that's not completely blatant, but Griffith is essentially writing out a living story. He gets to be this big grand hero, raise an army, become a king. All the Randys in Midland have zero idea, and essentially act as the extras in this massive play Griffith is putting on. If you're feeling some Antichrist vibes, yeah, that's kind of what it's going for. In biblical scripture, the Antichrist is described as a very charismatic figure, someone no one would suspect is evil. In fact, they would be so beloved and powerful that they would lead the world into being a singular nation with one currency. And from there, the beginning of Armageddon kicks off. So you can probably tell that Griffith doesn't actually have the best interests of these people in mind. And before you say, well, he's the lesser of two evils at the moment, the Kushans are still committing genocide, someone needs to stop them. It's a bit more complicated than that, but the most I'll say is this at the moment. For now, we move on to Farnese and Serpico resting in the ruins of a house, trying to take shelter from the snowstorm. Serpico tries to look on the bright side, but Farnese is miserable. He suggests that they just go back to the Holy City and face the consequences of the Tower of Conviction shenanigans, but she's not budging, because if they went back to the city and told the Holy See that their entire army was consumed by horrible monsters, they very well could be tried as heretics and executed. Plus, she just seems determined not to go home, period. Farnese also notices that Serpico is sitting a ways away from the campfire, and despite ordering him to stick closer to their only source of warmth, he refuses to move. And from here, we actually get a flashback into Serpico's childhood. We finally get to see who this dude really is. Turns out, he grew up in the Holy City, but just because it was some grand location with a lot of reverence behind it, doesn't make his life any easier. He grew up pretty rough, very poor and constantly fighting with other boys to keep what little food and money he had. His home was a cheap hovel on the edge of the city, where he lived with his mother. Serpico's mother was deathly ill for a long time, completely emaciated and looking more like a skeleton with skin stretched over it than a woman. Despite how awful their lives were, Serpico's mother insists that he is actually an aristocrat. She was so consumed in this delusion that she was certain his father was coming in any day now to sweep them into a high noble life. His mother once worked as a maid for a nobleman's mansion, where they had a brief affair that resulted in Serpico being born. So really, he was just the bastard son of an aristocrat. The only proof he has of this is the locket his mother gave him, which contained a picture of her and his father. Despite her assurances, Serpico knew that really believing in this stuff was just a bad idea. Actually trying to make a life in the city meant he couldn't fall into the same state his mother was in, waiting for someone else to arrive to save them. He was the only person they had to take care of her and earn a living. So eventually, Serpico simply stopped giving a shit. He just bottled up all of his emotions. One day, the other boys beat him so bad that he was paralyzed from the pain. Snow piled on top of him, and it seemed like he was about to freeze to death in the city streets. This was until a traveling carriage happened upon him. Turns out this is where Serpico and Farnese met one another. She found Serpico when he was about to die in the snow, and stepped on his head. Yeah, she was just as sadistic as a kid as she was as an adult, but she actually orders her servants to load Serpico into their carriage, even skipping communion to do it. Farnese has Serpico taken back to their family mansion, and essentially tried to turn him into her pet, nursing him back to health under the condition that he belongs to her now. In a sense, hiring him to hang out with her as a page, basically a personal servant. He has to live with a Van de Meehan family, but the wages are good enough that he's able to take care of his mother, even hiring a housekeeper to take care of her in his absence. His mother thinks this is his chance to break into aristocrat life, but Serpico is just happy they didn't need to take care of her anymore. His life with Farnese started off rough. She demanded absolute obedience and did whatever she could to make his life a living hell, but he just sucked it up and stuck by her. Farnese actually had a reputation for making her servants run off, even lighting one girl's dress on fire and badly burning her. We see that the reason Farnese does this is because, frankly, she wants attention. Her father was a workaholic that almost never came home, and her mother would abandon her alone in the mansion every single day. Their only way to make her happy was to shower her in material possessions. Meanwhile, she was left alone in a house so huge that the servants themselves would lose track of her. So the reason Serpico sticks by her despite all the shit she puts him through is because he sort of feels a kindred spirit with Farnese. They're both stuck in respective prisons, almost trapped in their circumstances. Sure, technically they're aristocrats now, and this life is a million times better than what Serpico was dealing with before, but it's still a prison. One night, a violent storm scares Farnese so bad that she orders Serpico to hold her hand all
all night. The lightning scares her and she demands Serpico make the thunder stop, but he can't do anything. A tree branch shatters the window and Farnese runs out of the house in terror. Serpico finds her dancing in the storm, almost in a trance, and she starts shattering some of the marble statues, saying you need to become a storm yourself, a reference to her philosophy we covered in part 3. She thinks the only way to not be afraid is to act as crazy and monstrous as the thing that scares her. Sometime after the storm, we see Farnese lead Serpico into the forest behind the mansion. They reach a clearing, and he takes note of the various small dead animals around them. Farnese puts a cage with a small bird inside of it in front of a large tree. A shrine to the Holy See placed in its trunk. Turns out she was taking care of the bird, but she says the animal never became attached to her, so she lights it on fire. Farnese refers to the clearing as her crematory, where she burns all the bad ones. Now, to most people, this is a sign that Farnese was destined to become a serial killer. In fact, she kinda was one in a way. But Serpico views this as proof that she intentionally tries to scare people away. He heard the stories about her extracurricular activities when she was a child, taking part in the stake burnings in the city square, but he can't hate her. Serpico views Farnese as a lonely girl that is afraid of being abandoned, of not having anyone to love her. Her own parents never showed actual affections, and her attempts to get people to pay attention to her scares them away. So the only thing she really had was, well, lighting things on fire. The only times when people shower her with affection and praise. Some time passes, and the rare occasion occurred that Farnese's father actually returned to the mansion. She tries to get his attention, but she's blown off instead. On top of that, her father orders Farnese to get rid of her beloved stuffed rabbit doll. He doesn't see anything wrong with the idea since it's just a raggedy toy he can replace with as many as she wants, but Farnese is visibly hurt at the suggestion. We find out that the toy came from one of the few times Farnese's family took a trip together. She nagged her father to buy it for her, and ever since she held it very near and dear to her heart. Nevertheless, she got rid of the rabbit, burning it in the crematory she set up in the forest. Serpico tried to comfort her, but she tells him to leave her alone, since she'll end up burning him up as well. Hopefully you guys are picking up on what they're going for here with Farnese. She's actually pretty reminiscent of how Guts was back in Golden Age. She's scared of being abandoned, so she wants people to stay at arm's length. She's the one who abandons. That way it won't hurt when someone leaves her. She tries to scare people away, to make herself the bully or the monster, but that's only so the world is less scary. To put it bluntly, Farnese is horribly insecure, and Serpico knows this, because in a way he feels the same thing. Not completely one-to-one, but he knows what it's like to hide who you really are to try to function in this very bleak world. Serpico basically did the same thing. He just smothered his emotions entirely. That way he could never be broken or disappointed. So the two kind of mirror each other. Serpico acts as if nothing is wrong and he can weather through anything, while Farnese is completely consumed by her emotions and would rather be hated than be ignored. Eventually, Serpico did run into the master of the house, Farnese's father. He took note of Serpico's locket and wanted to see it for himself. Well, when the master saw the picture inside of the locket, it all finally clicked. Serpico just met his father. That's right, he was the bastard son of the head to the Van de Meehan family. He is the older half-brother of Farnese. Instead of being a mind-shattering revelation that changes everything, Serpico kind of felt underwhelmed, though learning that he and Farnese are blood siblings did mess with him a bit. Still, it's not like he's eligible to inherit anything. Hell, the master himself makes that abundantly clear. He's already got 3 older sons all fighting over who gets to sit on the throne once it's time, so they struck a deal. Serpico keeps everything a secret, and his father will grant him a position of nobility. In a way, his mother was kind of right. This was his big shot to break into aristocracy, and it worked. Serpico's only request was for his father to actually meet and talk with his mother, but it's pretty clear that's never going to happen. Nevertheless, Serpico stuck by his promise. In fact, him being with Farnese all around made things better for everyone. She calmed down considerably, finally finding a kindred spirit she could spend time with. When the two grew older and made their debut in polite society, Farnese still clung on to Serpico, never considering any marriage proposals and still having a hair trigger of an attitude. In fact, she outright demands Serpico duel whoever insulted the two at any party they go to, almost setting up situations at times. Serpico never actually killed anybody at these duels, ending things in a draw, but he himself would be wounded in the process. This would earn the respect of his opponents, but would frustrate Farnese, so she decides to punish him for getting wounded, getting into some
pretty intensive interrogation sessions, if you know what I mean. She knows Serpico could win any of the duels he fights, but he refuses to get serious. Yeah, if the images on screen aren't enough to get the implications across, Farnese, in her own twisted way, fell in love with Serpico, and considering that Serpico is now very aware of their blood relations, that's a serious problem, so he has to think of a way to balance things out. If he did what she wanted, that means he'd kill people for little other reason than her sadistic pleasure, thus incurring the wrath of other noble families. At the same time, he still cares about Farnese and wants to keep her happy, just not in the way she really wants. And to make matters even worse, his mother's condition got worse, so bad that she is now in a permanent psychosis, believing Serpico was actually her beloved husband, believing in this fantasy that she got married to the head of the Vandamian family. Also, the Master never visited Serpico's mother, just like he expected. After several years, Farnese's father returned to the mansion to talk with Farnese. It turns out it's time to consider marriage options for his daughter. He heard the stories about the constant duels whenever Farnese went to a ball, so he set up an arranged marriage with a member of royalty in the hopes of calming her down. At first, it seemed like she was going to keep her head down and do as she's told, like she usually does when father gives an order, but the opposite actually happened. Serpico found her stripping naked in the crematorium in the forest they went to as children, and then she comes on to him, begging to take her away from the mansion, to run away together. She's finally pouring out her feelings to Serpico, her half-brother, and to his credit, he rejects her. He knows it's a bad idea on several levels, just from the incestuous angle alone. But not only that, if they run off together, the family would never stop hunting them. Deep down, Serpico actually does hate the fact they're related, because he might have some feelings for Farnese as well. It's not made 100% clear, it's more something you pick up on from this panel, where he relents on how he's almost trapped in his position, being tied to this family he never knew, but now dominates his life. And just as things seem to quiet down, Farnese sets the mansion on fire. She's fully lost her mind, using a candelabra to burn everything around her. Serpico saves her from a chandelier that almost crushes her to death during the breakdown, and it seems like she's finally snapped out of it.